All right, welcome everyone. I'm Raya. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of School of Humanity. We are an award-winning online high school where we learn by doing and having a positive impact on the world. Before we dive into the discussion, I just wanted to take a moment to explain why we decided to set up this panel. Throughout my experience in education, I've witnessed consistent short-termism. Our focus on next year's exam results often hinders our willingness to innovate in the long term. For many private schools, the concerns around cash flow prohibits their thinking around developing new forward-thinking education systems for the next generation. This obsession with the short term often gets in the way of what we need to do, which is reimagine our education system for tomorrow's world. And that takes time. It really takes generations to see the impact of a new education system. That being said, the panelists today are an exception to this norm. We've brought together some incredible minds who have been challenging the status quo, who have been taking courageous steps to reimagine schools for the future. So first we have Fathmath, who's a UNICEF Youth Foresight Fellow, Dr. Mike, who's the president of Minerva University, and Dr. Adil, who's founder of Citizen School Dubai. I'm really looking forward to our discussion, but before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment to guide you to thinking about some of the scenarios for the future, and we have a few slides here as well. Because when we think about the year 2100, there is often a struggle when it comes to stretching our imagination to even think about what life could be like in that year. And we heard this morning that the future is not set in stone. That being said, there are trends that are driving us in a certain direction. So if we can get the slides on. So one of the first trends that we have to think about is obviously artificial intelligence. It's been predicted that by the year 2100, a vast majority of tasks that we perform today will be automated by artificial intelligence. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, in an increasingly AI-driven world, what is the role of human skills, and what are the human skills that schools in the year 2100 need to be focusing on? Now, we can't talk about AI without considering the possibility or scenario of universal basic income. With millions of jobs potentially getting automated by artificial intelligence, many governments are considering that income might have to come from a universal basic income. And if the purpose of education is no longer to prepare you for a sustainable job or a sustainable source of income, we have to ask ourselves, what is then the purpose in terms of facilitating meaning and purpose in our lives? We were just at a panel on reimagining health, and one of the trends that came up was around changing demographics. By the year 2100, with advancements in medicine, many of us hopefully will be living to be more than 100 years old. Already, the average person changes careers 3 to 5 times in their lifetime. So imagine, with that extension of the lifespan, what that means for us and what that means for education, because this idea that education is something you just finish at a certain point in your life will increasingly become automated. It's also been predicted that by the year 2100, we will have colonies and habitats on the moon and on Mars. Now imagine what the curriculum would need to be to prepare the next generation to be cosmic citizens and to prepare them for the very first school on Mars. What are the values, mindsets, and skills that we need to teach the next generation? Now, we can't consider only artificial intelligence. There are exponential technologies like genetic engineering and biotechnology that are already revolutionizing human nature. And if we have the ability to use genetics, to use genetic engineering to change our intelligence, to change our abilities, what will that then mean for our education systems? What would then we have to focus on in order to ensure that we're respecting natural abilities and the abilities of those that may not have access to those technologies? Last but not least, we hear time and time again that one way or another, our climate will be radically different in the year 2100. At the most pessimistic perspective, we'd have rising sea levels, extreme weather events, climate migration happening, And even optimistically, it would mean a massive green economy revolutionizing to adapt. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we prepare young minds to take shared responsibility for our planet, but also how do we prepare them to adapt to this future? So before further ado, now I'd like to kind of go deeper into the discussion. I'm going to start with you, Fatima, since we just came to climate. You spent some time with UNICEF doing some incredible research with your peers in the Maldives around the implications of climate and schools in the year 2050. So tell us more about what you found from your research and a little bit about your methodology as well.
Hi everybody, it's so good to be here with you all. So as part of my Youth Foresight Fellowship, I conducted a participatory youth foresight research. So I engaged with adolescents and young people in my country. And in my research, I asked young people how they would shape their futures in 2050. The reason for this specific question was because due to the geographical isolation of our country, it's been a challenge to provide quality education to everybody. And because of this, so many people are having to migrate to islands from far away from their home islands. And that was me as well. When I was 8 years old, my parents made the hard, difficult decision to send me to study in the capital city because the school system at that time in my island was not that good. The quality of education wasn't good. I hardly knew English when I came, and I realized how far behind I was compared to my peers who were studying in the capital. So I thought, what better thing to do than ask the young people in my community what we can do to ensure there's access to quality education so that no matter where you are, you can have that access. So when I asked the young people this question, they thought I was a bit crazy. They were like, Zahanath will not exist who knows, we might not exist, right, in 2050. And then I had to tell them, okay, maybe you'll not be in school then, but what about the child who comes after you? What do you want changed so that the education system is better for them? So we used methodologies such as the futures triangle and images of the future to come up with scenarios, to come up with ideas on what we want changed. And the scenarios were like mind-blowing because I was engaging with children as young as age 12 and 13 and to the age 25. So for the scenarios, we all as young people saw a very high-tech, advanced school system. However, with the integration of AI and virtual reality, young people had questions like, how will we evaluate teachers in the future if we are using virtual reality or digital platforms to deliver lessons? How is going to be the relationship between the students and the teachers? And the funny thing is, I thought everybody would have wanted a virtual classroom, but young people did not want a virtual classroom. They wanted to see hybrid models of classrooms where you can engage with your students, where you can engage with teachers, which brings us back to like how important it is to have this social connection with your students, with your peer classmates as well. So in my country, majority of the scenarios revolved around wanting basic facilities in schools. So many in my island told that they wanted well-stocked libraries, science laboratories, and also computer labs, which were things they did not have access to because they did not have it in their school. And another thing they really wanted was to use virtual reality to do science experiments. They were explaining like how cool it would be to wear a goggle and do your science experiment. And on the other hand, another scenario was a very grim scenario where young people shared that, Zahanath, we might go underwater by 2050. And it is something that we we live in right now. Like, we are seeing the islands, the beautiful islands of Maldives fade away. Like the tree that I used to play in as a childhood no longer exists, and we are talking about a small time frame such as 10 years. So I wonder what will happen to my island in the next, will it exist even? So young people saw a future where had schools underwater. So they said they would be learning by using hologram figures, and they'll be homeschooled. So these are just the different scenarios young people are already thinking about, which brings us back to the importance of engaging children and young people in Foresight and giving them a space, making them a stakeholder when we are discussing things like education. Because the decisions made by you guys, by the adults in the room, are the things that we experience, we are living in. So I hope that by this discussion, we figure out a way we can make the education system more better for everybody, and that they can have quality access to quality education wherever they are. So yeah, thank you.
I love that you inspired teenagers to think about their descendants. And that's the ultimate underlying question of this panel, is how can we be good ancestors? Because many of us might not be around in the year 2100, but we're leaving behind a legacy. So thank you for that. Dr. Adil, Citizen School is considered to be one of the most progressive and innovative schools in the UAE. I'm curious what your vision for the future of education is, and more importantly, what's the purpose of education in the year 2100?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Raya. So probably it hit me while I was developing the school. I was not from the industry. To realize that 2 decades into entrepreneurship, how could a school have helped me have a less stressful life and is able to be a better entrepreneur, makes me lose less, probably, fail less. So what could have an education system done to help me do so? Then I came to the realization, basically, while developing the curriculum, is that the education system predominantly is geared towards training for one specific lifestyle. And that's the lifestyle of someone that is dedicated, committed, disciplined, do not make mistakes, and is usually as an individual. And that's probably the ideal employee. Yeah? But when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's never an individual. You cannot not make mistakes, because 90% of businesses fail within the first 3 years, and that's 200 years of statistics. So failure is the norm in entrepreneurship. And you also come to realize that nursery-aged kids today, 40% of them, by the time they graduate, will need to be self-feeding. They will not get jobs. All of that comes to mind. You realize that you also need to train for the lifestyle of the entrepreneurs. And you have to start earlier on. You have to infuse in them entrepreneurship thinking, basically research, finding solutions, developing teams, multi-venturing, meaning doing multiple ventures at the same time, because chances are high you will fail. So you'll have to have multiple skills, and then you'll have to do multiple things at the same time. This goes against a lot of concepts that people think is the reality. Like, for example, put everything into one thing, just focus on one thing, and then be perfect at it, and you'll succeed. Corona was a great example. I have a lot of friends that went to jail due to Corona because they are focused on one thing that failed miserably in Corona. They were very successful before Corona. And then on the other hand, had friends that became very rich out of Corona. But were they very smart? No, they were just lucky at many instances. So in business, How do you train for not gambling? Not taking your mother's and father's money and friends and gamble their money into an idea that you, and probably only you, believe it will work. So many concepts you come to realize are just talk, not substantiated by science. All of these come to play. This is why we have infused a curriculum. I mean, it's a British curriculum that we are working with, British IB in the later ages. But then we've developed our own entrepreneurship curriculum that starts with age 3. And the hope is some of them by age 13 get into actual venture building. In fact, we are already seeing many coming a bit earlier than that. And the beautiful thing that we've also just expanded to is that we've involved the parents. So we have co-mentoring with parents. And with that, we are creating teams that involve teachers or mentors, as we refer to them, students and parents, because it's a lifestyle. It's not a skill. Entrepreneurship is not a skill. You need all kinds of different sciences for you to function as an entrepreneur, yeah? But then it's a lifestyle that you got. And that experience has to also extend home. Otherwise, they will undo what you try to do at school, the parents, because the parents only know what they know. They've been into this specific education system, and they only know that education system. They don't know that there are other experiences that can be availed as an education. Let us also not forget a few concepts that I always also highlight. When we had the question we were discussing on the year 2100, I say, well, what humanity misses at many instances to realize that we are living an anomaly, a 200-year anomaly out of almost 500,000 years of reality of this species. Us as Homo sapiens, we've been around probably 300 to 500,000 years. It took us that much to come to 1 billion people in the year 1800, only 200 years ago. And then vaccination was invented, and now we are 8.5 billion, only in 200 years. And we will plateau by the year 2080, most probably, at around 10.5, maybe 11 billion. But the difference is, by then, the population, human population above 65 years old will be 25% of human population. Today, they are only 10%. I'll give you an example. By the year 2100, the population of China will almost halve. So what we see as the norm, stock markets doing like this, real estate is gold, precious metals, all of these concepts that you think are the fundamentals of economies will no longer be the fundamental of economies. So how do you prepare a generation that can maneuver around shocking realities that we will live through? That's a very difficult question. And I don't see, even me, it's not clear in my head. How would you skill for such a shocking reality whenever it hits?
It's a massive question, and I believe that a core part of it is focusing on complexity, systems thinking, interdisciplinarity, and the interconnectedness of all things, which is something Minerva University does really well. So, Dr. Mike, Minerva has been pioneering when it comes to reimagining higher education. We've talked a lot about schools, but universities are very much an important part of this discussion. I'm curious what trends you're seeing shape the future towards 2100 and how you're preparing future leaders for it.
Yeah, well, so much of what we've been talking about already is resonating with me. There's a few trends that we've tried to be at the forefront of. We're only a 12-year-old university. But one is certainly to recognize that for young people all over the world, their world is increasingly global. And we've reimagined campus life at Minerva University as a true global village. So we have students and alumni from 100 nations. And in residential life at Minerva University, no matter what residency hall you're in, you will be in a community of more than 40 nations at least. So you're learning to live and learn with people who are very different from you, and to navigate all of that difference and complexity, not just in the classroom, but in residential life as well. And all of our undergraduates are studying on 4 continents in 4 years. So in that very diverse residential community that you're part of, you are going to travel to cities like Berlin and Buenos Aires, Hyderabad, London, Taipei, Tokyo, Seoul. We teach all of our students to really treat those cities as their campuses. So by design and with a great deal of intention, we're not building extensive campuses in those cities. We're providing students with residency halls. They're cooking communally together in those residency halls, and we're teaching them how to take full advantage of all the learning assets that are available to them in all of those cities. So that's a part of it. I mean, teaching young, talented people how to be global citizens is very much a part of what we do. And Minerva University graduates could move to almost any city on earth, and they would know how to navigate it, they'd know how to build networks, they'd know how to participate in the solving of complex problems specific to that particular city. But it goes well beyond that as well. We've really thought about, given that residential life model, what kind of learning model can take full advantage of the opportunity presented to young people who are in a global community like that. And we've really integrated 3 learning modalities at Minerva University that I think are especially well suited to young entrepreneurs. One, we have a small seminar model, dialogue-based seminars with faculty who are trained in an active learning pedagogy that we can deliver anywhere in the world. So many of our students, for instance, who are in San Francisco are in class with their fellow classmates in a city like Taipei. And that model is grounded in the science of learning. We know that if I stand before all of you today and lecture at you for 50 minutes, even if I am a world expert in the subject that I'm talking to you about, 2 years from now, you're highly unlikely to remember anything I said, no matter how good your notes were. The science of learning is quite clear on this subject. But if you're in a small active learning seminar where you feel a sense of accountability for showing up in that seminar classroom, having read the material and given it thought, and then you're engaged with your professor and your classmates in talking about those materials and their relevance to the problems that you're passionate about solving, not only are you going to retain much, much more of that information for a much longer period of time, you're also going to build skills in that classroom that will be really relevant to your life and to your career. So the small seminar classroom is core to what we do, but it's integrated with what we do with project-based learning all over the world. And it's further integrated with what we do with culturally immersive experiential learning in the cities that I just mentioned. So imagine if you are interested in problems related to sustainable energy, and those are the kind of problems that you're passionate about solving as a young person. You're going to major in that field at Minerva University. You'll have a whole scope and sequence of classes where you're building knowledge and skills that are meaningful and relevant to solving problems related to sustainable energy. But you're immediately going to be applying all that knowledge and those skills to complex projects, and those projects will look very different in a city like San Francisco than they will in a city like Seoul or a city like Buenos Aires, and you'll be collaborating on those projects. So if you are from Dubai, you're going to be collaborating on a project like that with students from Brazil and Korea and the Maldives and the US, all bringing your diverse and unique perspectives to how you might go about solving that problem. And building up a great deal of cultural competencies through the experiential learning you're doing. So, I mean, that's, in a nutshell, what all students participate in at Minerva University. And I think it's one of the reasons that in our first 6 graduating classes, 12% of our students have founded their own funded companies. It's as I mentioned, a very well-suited program for aspiring entrepreneurs.
That's amazing. And I have to say, as someone who's hired Minerva graduates, I completely agree with that. You're definitely producing some incredible young minds. So thank you for pioneering in that space. So one of the ways we learn at our school is also through interdisciplinary projects and challenges. And our sustainability-focused challenges are some of the most popular ones. We have ones like protecting our oceans, food, energy, water security. And we find that when we map the school curriculum to these interdisciplinary challenges and learners have the option of applying the, knowledge into tackling that issue, it really drives engagement. But I also see that it inspires incentivizing learning in a different way, instead of wanting to learn for exams, actually learning to better the world. And Fatima, I know in the Maldives, obviously, climate emergency and climate change is a huge concern, and you touched on it in your research. I'd love to go a bit deeper into that and learn more about how you think schools can both prepare the next generation with the necessary skills to tackle climate change, but also how schools need to adapt around the implications of it.
So I believe, the climate resilience and sustainability education is not just important, it's become vital to us now and the generation to come, because right now we are observing so drastic and devastating changes because of the climate crisis. So I believe we really need to rethink how we educate the younger generation. So I believe schools must go beyond the traditional subjects and teach students subjects such as green skills, STEM, to make them better prepared for those climate emergencies, or better prepare them to be ready for those things. So for instance, we can teach children how to care for the environment at a younger age. That way they know to protect, So I believe we should really be incorporating a more skill-based system into the curriculum, and also to base the education system to the context of the country. So for example, in Maldives, we have the Western education system, and there's rarely talk about Maldives, what our islands are, how to protect our islands. So I think really working on educating the generation to be closer to nature will make them more caring towards it, and also would make them want to protect it as well. So I believe, schools should also do similar things such as drills to really stimulate scenarios in a situation of climate emergency. Because, for example, I believe schools in Maldives should have drills for tsunami warnings, what to do if a tsunami warning comes. Because I experienced the tsunami in 2004. I was so little, but I remember it so vividly to this day. I was just 3 years old, and I ask myself every time there's a tsunami warning, I go blank. I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And this is something I feel like the younger generation should also be taught to deal with these climate emergencies that is to come. So by including more green skills, by teaching STEM, we are educating the next innovators who will help solve these issues we will face in the future. So I believe it's vital that we start now, because then only can we protect the environment for the generations to come. So I honestly think by teaching the future generations right now, we will really help them thrive, and we will also help them adapt. So I think it's really important we start now.
Yeah, And I think, as you say, it's important to understand the facts when it comes to the future and climate, but having an emotional connection to nature and our planet is the foundation of it all, so that we actually care. Dr. Adil, I love that your school was founded on this principle of preparing for a different lifestyle and different path in life. But what about the paths that don't exist yet? It has been said that a majority of the jobs that middle schoolers today will be doing in the future don't exist yet. So how can educators change their ways and adapt to prepare for a future of uncertainty?
I believe the future of many education offerings will be presented in experiences. Now, I am now picking up on an experience, which is the experience of the lifestyle of entrepreneurs, beside the classical approach, because going against the classical approach is not very helpful. It's not the way to do it, because the parents have went through a specific education system. They only know that. The regulators regulate according to a specific history, and they try to maneuver around that, and that's because what they care for is that at the end of the day, students are being taught in a specific manner, and they are trying to protect all the stakeholders around the education system. This is their role, basically. But then, opening a new school, the next investor that would open a new school, I would always encourage that they address their offerings or design their offerings according to experiences, okay? A certain education experience. So Adil went with the entrepreneurship, but others could go for other experiences. There are different parts of the world that did actually do that, like in sports or in arts or in certain sub-segments of certain industries, like being in the engineering or being a more industrial, and so on and so forth. I think schools moving forward will always have more than one experience to train for, and that is to cover as many educational experiences as possible, and hence put on way more offerings to the rest of the market. The fact of the matter, though, whatever experience that needs to be presented, it will have to start with growing curiosity, ability to research, ability to communicate and form teams, being resilient, addressing things using science more so than only feelings. I think those are fundamentals, regardless of whatever education experience you'll come out to offer.
Couldn't agree more. We see this ourselves as well as an online school. It's not the right approach for everyone, but it's the perfect approach for some. And my vision for the year 2100 is that we have a variety of different educational models, some that are radically different from each other, to have pathways for everyone. So I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So one thing that I don't believe will last much is that I am in that school because of the name of it.
Yeah.
Okay? Or I am for that curriculum because of the name of it. This will die away definitely. And the sooner the better, in my opinion. I think schools will come up soon enough whereby you are rated by the community on how is the experience as it is, and what's the outcome at the end of the day. That will be what matters the most down the line. Today, parents just don't know better. The community just don't know better, and I think that will change in time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Dr. Mike, I'd love to switch gears with you a little bit about ethics. So as we're going through the AI revolution, there's increasing concerns about the ethical implications, and also especially a small group of technical founders in Silicon Valley having so much control over the development of this powerful technology. And you mentioned that a strong percentage of your learners are founders. I'm curious about how you're approaching ensuring that these future founders are developing ethical and humane technologies.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say not only in a field like AI, but we're really thinking about what does it mean to put put talented young people on a pathway to leadership in technology and sustainability and health and diplomacy? And what kind of characteristics do you want those young people to have as they begin their journey to, and their path to leadership in fields like that? And I think one of the things that we've thought quite a bit is, what role can a university play, not just in building knowledge or career-oriented skills for young people, but actually in nurturing and building their empathy, their capacity for understanding each other across differences and across different cultures, and how might that impact their leadership journey over time. We had a group of students at Minerva University actually create an AI constitution very much focused on this question. What is the ethical framework for AI that can ensure that as a technology, AI is really used to enhance humanity rather than to cause disruption and make the world more dangerous. So I think our students are, through their experience at Minerva University, kind of naturally inclined to think about those sorts of questions, because they've had this valuable experience of what it actually feels like to collaborate across many different cultures, to cooperate in the solving of complex problems.
Incredible, the future, but it makes me optimistic. The future is bright. I want to stretch our imagination a little bit for the last round of questions. We have a few minutes. So Fatima, if we had the first school on Mars, which is bound to happen, what kinds of skills, values, or mindsets do you think we should be teaching at this school?
That's interesting, because young people in one of my sessions really thought we will have a school in Mars by 2050. They were so certain Elon Musk will fly them to Mars. And I was like, oh, if we have a school in Mars, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? And when I asked them this, they said they would learn about being more adaptive, being more innovative. So that, life on Mars would definitely be different. I vision it to be very different to life on Earth. So they said they want skills that will teach us to problem solve, to critical think. And they also emphasized on how important it was to teach the students to really care for the Mars. They said they don't want to repeat. They don't want the same thing to repeat. So they want students to learn how to care for their new planet. And another thing was all about space travel, because they said, if we are going to Mars, it's possible to travel to galaxies or other planets. So I think space traveling, space exploration, these things will be very huge and it will be taught in Mars. So yeah.
That's exciting. Well, we'll have to wait and find out. Dr. Adil, as the role of technology expands, there's a lot of discussion around the role of the educator. Can you help us imagine in the year 2100, what will teachers even be? And we probably won't call them teachers, we're already calling them mentors and guides and facilitators. But how do you foresee the role of the educator, or is it even beyond our imagination at this stage?
I would believe that at probably that point in time, knowledge will move from feeding the kids with knowledge versus getting the kids asking for knowledge, okay? And with that, the teachers become actually mentors, yeah? And their main role will be more about guiding on few fronts. Guiding on how to research, for example. Guiding on how to communicate and team up and lead and strategize. And most importantly, is helping infuse in them ethics. Because in this world where lines are all getting blurred, the problem with and I'll use the example of AI. So what you get out of AI is as good as what you infuse into it. If you infuse good stuff, you get that 100 times magnified. If you infuse bad stuff, you'll get that 100 times magnified. So how do you guide future generations on being good humans? Will become the toughest problem to solve, because that role is being taken away from families and being taken away from parents in many jurisdictions around the world. And it's such a sad reality. So how would you then infuse ethical code of conduct whereby you make sure that what gets in technology is good so that what comes out is good? And then at the end of the day, what we should all care about is quality of life. And quality of life has to be measured. Quality of life has to cover oneself and their communities, societies, for the long term. And under that umbrella, everything falls. So when we have the discussion on environment, we talk about environment as if it's a good thing to have. We won't survive if we don't have an environment. It's a survival thing. It's not a good thing to do. You understand me? And that's the discussion has to change in certain instances. We are not going to move to Mars. I mean, the challenge is there nicely because it pushes technology and the edge of what we can do. But we ain't going to move to Mars because there will be a human population crisis already. We are already in it. Human population crisis will solve most of environmental issues. Will solve a lot of poverty issues. And that's just live it for the next 75 years. So yeah, quality of life, code of conduct.
Absolutely. Allowing more and more people to flourish and life should become the ultimate goal. Dr. Mike, one thing I find really impressive about Minerva is you've been a hybrid university way before COVID, which is way ahead of the game. And I'm curious how you see our learning relationship with technology evolving in the next century. How do we think about this issue of what should stay digital or what can be digitized versus what should stay human?
Yeah, it's a great question. We were in some ways during the pandemic in a uniquely good position because we had created this online seminar model and that could just continue uninterrupted. But what we lost, I think, was equally important, which was some of our ability to create community for our students and to help them to foster a really deep sense of belonging among one another. And we see that as as every bit as important to what we're doing to the kind of learning that takes place at Minerva University. So, I think we're absolutely going to see exponential growth in the ability of technology to facilitate some kinds of learning for our students, and we're already seeing this. We are not very far at all from every single student having a personalized tutor in every subject that is just as if it's on their shoulder all the time. That will happen quite soon. The question is, what kind of learning does that facilitate and what does it miss? And I love this idea of the ongoing role of human beings providing mentorship and helping students to become, frankly, more wise and helping them to learn how to interact with each other despite their differences. I mean, it strikes me that is very likely to remain a role for us to participate in as human beings. And I think we're going to need that because, with AI in particular, that there is a world in which this new technology is going to be used in very dangerous ways, as every technology before it has been. And we depend in our cultures on wisdom to make sure that doesn't happen. The philosopher William James once said about technology that he feared that we are like a baby who has figured out how to turn on the bathwater but can't figure out how to turn it off. And that to me is a very provocative and wise thought. And I want our students at Minerva University to grapple with these difficult questions, to be thinking now about the kind of frameworks and approaches that we're going to need to make sure that AI is used for good and not in ways that are really dangerous to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're almost out of time, and I wanted to ask one last rapid-fire round of a question to all of you. Coming to the present moment now, what is one actionable step that governments, school leaders, humans can take to pave the way for our education system towards this future? So, Fathmath, we'll start with you.
I think I will go with introducing green skills. Make the curriculum system more skill-based. And yeah.
That's a really good step, yes.
Don't delay the maturity of your kids. Ready them now, as young as possible, for different options in life. That's our responsibility, and if they are not ready by the end of school, it's your problem as a parent, and your problem as an educator. That's our responsibility.
Absolutely.
Just two things which to me are related. One, I think the future of learning is project-based. So incentivize schools to do great project-based learning. Don't disincentivize them. And then when it comes to the way we assess students, don't assess them in ways that create zero-sum games. Assess them so that you can better understand whether this particular student will thrive in this particular learning model, and assess them in ways that actually incentivize them to collaborate with each other rather than to compete with each other.
Absolutely, and I'm going to build on that on one last action item, which is to break down the boundaries that we have between subjects and teach and facilitate more interdisciplinary education, because all the challenges and scenarios we explored today can't be tackled through siloed thinking, but rather we need an interdisciplinary approach. And I want to add to that one last suggestion, which is to expand the ways that we measure the success of an education system beyond just literacy rates, which are of course important, to go into the impact our learners are having on the world around them, and actually beginning to attempt to measure that at scale. So thank you so much, everyone. That's all we have time for today. Please feel free to come to our panelists asking questions.